According to linguist Noam Chomsky, the main benefit of the evolution of language was the way that it impacted thought, particularly our ability to plan for the future. However, for most of us, language is a tool of communication. Today, a great deal of our communication takes place online, whether that's on social media, via messaging apps, or in the new and terrifying world of the metaverse. One common area of confusion for language learners when it comes to communication is in writing emails. People learning English are often taught the proper way to write and structure formal and informal letters, but, true fact, nobody has written a letter since like 1530, when Henry VIII wrote to the Pope begging for a divorce so he could marry English Renaissance pin-up girl Anne Boleyn. Emails have pretty much replaced letters, so it's much more important to know how to write emails today than it is to write actual mails, or A-mails, if you will. However, the approach to email writing is not the same as that of letter writing. Rather than having a simple formal-informal distinction, we have to look at email writing from a pragmatic perspective. Sending emails is quicker and easier than sending actual mail, which means people are bombarded with emails of all types, whether that's messages from colleagues, long catch-up emails from family members, or unsolicited marketing emails from companies selling their products. The real trick to effective email writing is knowing your audience. And with so many different generations using email today, we need to know how to communicate across generations. So that's what we're going to look at in this video. It's time to play the generation game. Baby boomers are split into two groups. The lucky retired group, enjoying their free time because they have the financial freedom to do so, and the unlucky swan song group, now in a second career because they aren't financially able to retire. Both groups value and respect tradition, so in communicating with baby boomers, you need to show respect for their life experience and way of doing things. Don't insist on your newer, faster, better way of doing things, because that's just going to annoy them. Boomers were and are a workaholic generation, and they are very proud of their achievements, often defining themselves with respect to their career and wealth. However, this has often come at the expense of their relationships. Boomers have the highest divorce rate of any generation ever. Given these enormous sacrifices, the baby boomer generation wants to remain useful even in retirement or in their second career. So, how does this affect your email communication with the baby boomer generation? Well, first of all, it's worth noting that boomers prefer face-to-face meetings and phone calls over emails. So, if you're emailing them, then it's best to offer them a way to set up a personal call to discuss issues further. Turning up in person shows that you respect and value their time. Boomers appreciate formal and direct communication, and they value background information and details. This means that they're not terrified by long emails. This is a generation that grew up without email and writing actual letters, so this is the generation that sticks most closely to traditional letter writing conventions. That means long and detailed explanations of events, attempting to cover everything in one message, because they are less likely to own a smartphone, so don't check their emails every 5 minutes like subsequent generations. In fact, they may check their emails only once a week, so make sure you include everything you need for the foreseeable future. They'll appreciate more formal writing styles too, for example, addressing the email with "Dear so-and-so." This is noticeable in academic contexts, where the faculty can often be older, tenured professors who will often address their students and colleagues in this way. Gen X is sometimes called the sandwich generation because they're sandwiched between baby boomers and millennials. 47% of Gen X have a parent and a child who rely upon them, which is a lot of responsibility to take on, and 84% say they have a parent who depends upon them for emotional support. So while they're close to their parents, this close connection also includes a lot of responsibility. Despite this, Gen X are often the first to volunteer for extra responsibility in the workplace because they've been taught that they have to take on a lot and be dependable. This is because they're a generation of latchkey kids. With two parents who went out to work or having grown up in a divorced single-parent home, they were forced to be self-reliant and unsupervised early on. Because of their experiences, Gen X is quite a pessimistic and distrustful generation. They're the first generation to not do as well financially as their parents or their children, so building trust partly depends upon speaking their language. So how does this affect email communication with Gen X? First of all, remember that Gen X grew up with email before there were text messages and messaging apps, and their teachers stressed the importance of correct writing. Incorrect grammar and punctuation drives Gen X nuts. They love full sentences, so avoid the use of abbreviation and text slang, for example, LOL, LMFAO, see you tonight, and so on. Given their rather pessimistic outlook, they like to be told how it is. Give them data over your opinions and feelings so they can figure out their own way of doing things. They also value shared responsibility, so offer help and solutions. They value professional etiquette, so will expect a degree of formality in your writing. They're also a generation which is still happy to make and take a phone call, so for more complicated issues, offer them a way out of the email chain. They also value a balanced life. Gen X grew up with workaholic boomer parents. Seeing that, Gen X rejects work as the point of life and instead sees it as part of life. As such, they value a work-life separation. They'll be friendly at work, but not friends. That means small talk is appreciated, but over-familiarity is distrusted. This is the biggest generation, in that it has the largest population, and is probably the most discussed. Interestingly, millennials are closer to their parents than any previous generation. They're often called the boomerang generation because they move back in with their parents far more commonly than any other generation in history. This is largely due to them being caught in a series of economic crises and circumstances that have prevented them buying their own homes. Despite their closeness to their parents, millennials tend to reject the traditional hierarchical status quo. They're known for their resolve in sharing their opinions and ideas, and have often been the generation who've sought to disrupt industries with new ways of doing things. Millennials have also witnessed an exponential growth in technology firsthand, and therefore have an intuitive grasp of it which exceeds the preceding generation. They're a generation of digital pioneers. Alongside this technological intuition, millennials also value education highly, with a significant increase in higher education attendance than preceding generations. This combination of factors, in turn, has made them adaptable, allowing them to move with the shifting economic sands. This adaptability also means that they place greater importance on meaningful motivation. Since they're less likely to stick to one particular career path, they want to make sure that whatever they're doing at a given moment is satisfying. This is why they've pioneered new and creative ways of making a living as influencers, coders, and creatives. So how does this impact email to millennials? Millennials value efficiency and a digital-first approach. They're highly unlikely to write an actual letter, and as new technologies have emerged, they've even moved from emails to other digital channels to communicate. Millennials also value self-expression. 40% of millennials have tattoos, and over 75% have social media profiles. To connect with a millennial, ask their opinion and ideas, and let them put their stamp on things. They're far more comfortable expressing opinions and feelings and care less about the data than Gen X. They grew up with tech-speak, so they're adept and accustomed to shorthand communication and modern slang, which means informal language and grammar is not a problem for this generation. However, their emphasis on the importance of education and adaptable nature means that millennials are still capable of switching between formal and informal registers depending on the context. So, tailor your emails to the circumstances. This could mean switching your salutation from dear when emailing your professor to hi when emailing a friend or colleague. Gen Z is also known as the I generation, as in iPhone, iPad, and so on. They're the first generation of digital natives, and have always had communication tech and social media. This is a generation that is therefore bombarded with communication across many different platforms, and one which is likely to have 100 notifications on their phone at any given moment. Diversity is the norm for Gen Z. They've grown up in a borderless online community connected to ideas, cultures, and people from every corner of the globe. This means that their use of language is also impacted by the various communities they're part of, whether that's online discussion platforms, online gaming communities, or social media channels. Because they're so constantly bombarded by messages, Gen Z value direct and entertaining communication. It's therefore okay to be informal and skip out any unnecessary parts of the email, even including the salutation and signature, particularly if you're mid-thread. The platforms they've grown up with often include character limits and communication via memes, so this generation are used to sound bites. They're the inventors of the TLDR, too long didn't read idea. With that in mind, they would probably rather be DM'd than emailed. It's worth noting too that Gen Z appreciate visual communications, with face-to-face communication making a comeback in this generation via video calls and video messages. 70% of Gen Z want to communicate face-to-face at work, 83% of Gen Z are more comfortable expressing their emotions through emojis compared to 71% of millennials, 61% of Gen X, and 53% of baby boomers. As such, emails aren't the default communication tool for Gen Z. So if you're reaching out via email, then it should be kept succinct, and don't worry about formality, as they won't appreciate you wasting their time when there's so many other messages to respond to. For longer conversations, try to invite an opportunity for face-to-face contact, either digitally or in person, or the option to move the conversation to a messaging service that is more commonly used in that location.